You alluded to earlier about what I'll call the power of people to change things, to move things along. What is the Democratic Party doing to adjust or change their message to get people, populace, to vote, to change things? And we're talking about all these problems here in the legislature, and I think Corey, the problem down here is that we don't have enough Democrats in there. And I'm thinking, okay, what is the Democratic Party doing to change their message, what they stand for, and everything to get more people on their side?
Talk starts in Manchester.
I was just about to say, Peter and I can't particularly answer your question because the strategy is largely, if not entirely, crafted by the Manchester consortium of Democrats that I like to sort of funnily call the Manchester Mafia, the Ray Buckley elite of the Democratic Party. That man needs to not be the leader of the Democratic Party, and then we can move forward. But it's very hard because the structure of the party, there were former members of the legislature like Tony LaBranch and others who, we disagree with, a little bit more out there than we are, but talked very eloquently about how the Democratic Party's structure, the structure of it as a party, is not as democratic as it should be when purporting the principles of what they do out in their elections. So what we as Democrats can do, though, is engage with Tom Burgess, our local town Democratic chapters, and start to shift where the party is from the ground up. And I think Tom's doing a good job here locally at organizing Democrats around the region.
On the county level.
And on the county level, actually, too. Yeah, the Hillsborough County Democrats do a good job. Katie Cutchell along with Tom Burgess. And so there is potential, I think, through some people who my contemporaries, my peers, they say, some of them, electoral politics aren't worth it. The others say, if it is worth it, you got to run as an independent. I think that there are two-party structures in this country. There have been for over 150 years, for a long time. And I think that we should probably operate within that and do our best to do what we can at a state level, local level, to change the Democratic Party. And the more that Democrats across the country, frankly, stood up, changed their local Democratic Party chapters, and then ultimately their state party chapters, the National Party would become more small d Democratic as well, and we would be able to open up the conversation as to what the strategy of the party should be, etc. But the final bit that I'll say there, and that's as nice as I can put it, I guess. I think it was pretty nice. But the final bit that I'll say there is ultimately this does come from the bottom up. The people, you and I, us in this room, all of us who will be participating in the election in one form or the other, that is, at the end of the day, the Democratic Party. That is the party coming together as us who believe in similar value sets, a similar state as it should be, a government as it should protect its people, serve its people, and working to advance the candidates and policy positions which stem from those values. And so I have my problems and my criticisms of people who are in the establishment of this party, but it is the people who I see in this room who are asking the questions about where we should strategize, who are trying to do whatever they can to get the message out there, who give me hope and who make it clear to me that there is potential there for the bottom up to boil out and change the whole party from the top down.
He was from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. He said all politics are local, and they are. And I can tell you a brief story, and Kath probably remembers this better than I do, but I think it was 2010
when we ran,
and all of the Democrats in the district lost. And we, at that time, we had Greenville, and we had New Ipswich, very friendly town, New Ipswich, and Sharon, of course, Peterborough. And so one of the Republicans immediately resigned because he didn't want it. So I decided, well, I'll run in a special election. Well, I heard immediately from Ray Buckley. He said, we're going to run this election. This is very important to us. This is a special election. We're going to run it. I said, I'm going to run my election. I didn't take any money from Concord. The gentleman I was running against, Mr. Simpson, who had just recently moved here from out of state, and was comparing himself to Walter Peterson. I said, I got this. So, and he refused, didn't want to debate me, and because I was just going to take him down because he had just moved here and he was part of that group moving here to try to influence government. So it all turned out well, but there again, I was told or asked, I guess, by Ray Buckley that we will run this campaign, not you. And I got a lot of support from the entire district, and of course went back to Concord, but it was the year that Bill O'Brien, my cousin, was speaker, so that was kind of a hard show.
I love that story.
So Ray Buckley isn't elected though.
Well, he's elected by the state committee, and so, I don't want to get this wrong.
Very
but
correct.
Yes, the state committee, which was expanded in last year's convention by a resolution on the floor to include, maybe you would vote better actually, the specifics as to what they included there, but they expanded the votes, they expanded the membership of the state party. So someone like Tom being chair of the local party chapter, he's a member of the state party. Some of our delegation in the legislature were state party members, and then there were different ways that state party members could be elected through different processes, and that was expanded to include a whole bunch more people. That's the rough cut of it without getting specifics wrong. And that opens up the process to be able to, frankly, Buckley had a whole lot of people who had been hand selected in those specific positions to make sure that he could keep his position tight. He was picking his voters. And I'll let Tom speak after this too, because he'll probably know a decent amount.
I just want to endorse everything you two have both said about the state leadership, Ray Buckley in particular. He's been there a long time and has quite a losing record. And he was challenged seriously last go around, but a lot of the votes are kind of by people he's appointed and those sort of things. But the voting was expanded, so there's hope that next cycle there'll be more success.
He's paid quite well.
And I don't know anyone who's pro him other than people who are connected with him. The other thing I wanted to just, and this is like a can of worms, but the Democrats, the progressives and the mainstream or the centrists or the moderates, whatever you want to call them, the Republicans have the same thing. When they had the primary in Texas, that we heard that Ken Paxton won, which was unbelievable to compete Jonah Cornine. Not that I'm a fan of John Cornine, but he's at least
a two-week
baseball, I think. But anyway, we have our own division, and that sometimes concerns me, is that we have our progressive wing and our moderate wing, if you want to call them labels. We need to coalesce, and at the end of the day, let's have our primaries. If we have a primary, support who you got to support. I think that the Democratic Party did a horrible job with Zoran Mondani. He was not supported by the mainstream. He's from the progressive wing. He was the choice. He ran in the Democratic primary. He won the Democratic primary. And the leaders of the Democratic Party did not come around and support him, and some of them never endorsed him. That's wrong. And neither side should do that in this, healthy debate that we have about what our party should be about. Whoever wins, we all need to get behind, because that person ran in our party as our candidate this cycle. You want to challenge them? That's your opportunity next cycle. But I think that's sometimes a problem, probably for the Republicans too, but definitely for us.
I agree. I mean, you look at the Maine Senate election, one of the most critical elections in taking back the United States Senate, which there's real potential for in a way that didn't exist 6 months ago. Mary Patello, I think, is going to win in Alaska. I think there's potential to win in Texas. I'm not as optimistic because some people, Texas is Texas. I mean, Ann Richards in the 90s, I remember her. She gives me optimism. She gives me hope, right? She was tough.
Yes.
He got a silver foot in his mouth. Stuff like that was incredible. You just can't make people like that up. But I do believe that people like Sherrod Brown in Ohio and others can win. And Maine, no matter how you look at the composition, is one of those critical seats that either we win it or we don't. We win the Senate back or we don't. And you have a bunch of Democrats who don't really like Plattner, who were upset for a variety of reasons at his nomination or close to nomination, and are coming out to say, I don't care if we lose Maine. Well, I do. I have some criticisms of Graham Plattner. I do care if we lose against Susan Collins, and Peter is right. She's very popular, and if the Democrats are not united, then we won't win that seat. So you're 100% spot on, Tom. I think no matter what happens, we need to coalesce at the general election period to make sure that we go on and elect the people who we agree with more than the people that are on the other side. It's not that I fully agree with, I'm not a sycophant of. We should stop thinking of politics as the art of sycophancy. This is politics. We agree with the best person in the choices that we have to serve in that seat, whatever it might be. And so I think you're spot on. Well, we'll take a couple more if there are some quick ones, but we are out of time here.
Collins is a millionaire because of defense money. You
Sure.
mentioned at the local party level, and Peter, way back here tonight, you were talking about in Texas, you know, what happened. But their problem why they lost in the primary was because the Democrats would not allow the voting to continue longer. Like we have 7 o'clock in Peterborough, that's the end of it. So that was their complaint, because we're not winning right now. We needed to get more votes in. Therefore, you should have left us to keep voting past the deadline.
And New Hampshire has a very good record as far as if people are, standing
In line.
they're allowed to still vote, even if it's 9 or 10 o'clock.
Phil Runyon would never let
Yeah.
Linda keep you out of line.
Merrimack,
Not that I do it.
I would say, but that's what happened in Texas
Yeah.
in one of their races.
There's some crazy things that happen with voting around this country where people aren't allowed to give water to those standing in line. I mean, that's absurd. You're standing in line for 5 hours to go to a hot gymnasium in the middle of June in some of these primaries in southern states, and you're not allowed to be handed water.
I saw Kathy Manfrey giving out water.
Oh, stop it. You're getting in her in trouble, Peter. Stop it. But it's crazy. We need to make sure that everybody has a right to vote. And the Republicans will say that everyone does have a right to vote. Sure, but if your polling place is an hour away, if you have to wait for a few hours to get into the polling place, there's a whole bunch of small, different suppression tactics that are
Well,
used to
right
make
to
sure that
vote if
people
you're
don't go out
voting
to
for the
vote.
Republicans, that's
Well,
what they were fussing about.
Absolutely.
Regarding, there's a couple things. And I promise this will get to a question.
No, it's all good.
But
I don't think Corinne's going to come in here. with
no,
this.
no, no. So regarding Ray Buckley and his election, the one thing I didn't hear from anybody is that when it comes to electing the chair of the Democratic Party in the state, within the caucus of people that do vote for him, those are open ballots. So part of it is that Ray Buckley knows if you voted against him and will directly punish you as a result of that.
That's a great
That is a massive portion of the reason Ray Buckley has been able to maintain control. Now, I've heard from separate people that he will have knockdown, drag out screaming matches with members of the Shaheen family. So there's a misunderstanding that they're all in agreement with each other. But they have identified exactly what they don't like, which is the progressive wing of the party. And because of that, you will see them monopolize their force against candidates like Steve Marchand in 2018 when they ran Molly Kelly. So on the town level, and Tom knows this, that there's a very strict policy to not put your finger on the scale when it comes to primary candidates. That's not necessarily the case, at least behind closed doors, when you were talking about statewide efforts from the people that have held the power within the Democratic Party.
Not even behind closed doors.
Fair enough.
Because at
Fair
the
enough.
meetings, they were pushing for their chosen candidates.
You're right.
This year.
That's correct. But it's sort of beside the point. It's sort of beside the point. Because the real issue is that they have a very specific way that they want to win. They have a specific context in which they want to win. And that does not include what has been described as the more populist side of the Democratic Party. If you want to wonder why somebody like Bill Paxton just won in Texas, the answer is because Donald Trump years ago decided that it was going to be a winning strategy to appeal to the populist wing, quote unquote populist wing, of the Republican Party. And that drove massive success for him. And now, because there is a sort of ideological conflation that occurs between Donald Trump and right-wing populism, anybody that votes 100% in line with Donald Trump is therefore the people's candidate. And so the conservatives, especially within the state of New Hampshire, who, again, to sort of loop back around to the libertarian conversation, who are about liberty for everybody. If you want to hear them talk, they say it's all about liberty. It's about your individual liberty, your right to do what you want to do. That's a really populist sentiment on its face. Whether you understand that or what that means after it becomes the law is a very different story. But my question, after sort of describing all of this, is that I have to wonder why we talk about the Democrats, right? Who are the Democrats? What do they believe? Why do we discuss them as if they are an ideology? They're not. They're a tool. Just like the Republicans are a tool. If you look back to the history of the United States, the Democrats, their original point was the party of racism. Straight up. Right. So the idea that party identities do not change over time is preposterous. And there seems to be this lack of historical context surrounding what the parties are and what they do. And we talk about Democrats in this monolithic way as if they are one consistent belief. But we isolate and ignore the political movements that occur within this country. And so I guess my question to you guys is, as state reps coming in here, whether you like it or not, you are part of that apparatus. And I've heard things from both of you that perpetuate this exact scheme. Right? When we were talking about there were several sessions ago, I asked a question about John Kuiper, right? Who has since left the Democratic primary, specifically because he had been directly iced out of any kind of support, and they decided to run Cindy Warmington, who is now setting up meetings with progressive constituency to try and do damage control, try and figure out how can she possibly capture the progressive vote, because they know they cannot win without that vote, yet they consistently refuse to actually acknowledge the issue that the progressive wing of the party actually advocates for. So when I hear things like, well, money drives the bus, but it's really the power of the people, that's sort of talking out of both sides of the mouth. And so what I really want to understand is, where do you guys actually land on this issue? Is it money that drives politics, or is it the people that drive politics? Is the party the identity, or is ideology what creates the perception of an identity of a party at a given moment in time?
Neither of those things are binary. Money does control politics, as Peter said in his answer to you about John Kuiper, which I said at the time, I disagree with how Democrats treated John Kuiper. I don't think that they should have poo-pooed him and put him on the back burner and not give him any chance at a fair shot of the nomination, which they didn't. I think that anybody who puts their name on the Democratic primary ballot should be treated the same by the institution. And it's the same thing that I said in my original answer about the country for so long being a two-party system, where you have to operate, and you're exactly right, these two parties have had different names, they've had different ideologies that have captured the majority of the party. They are not ideological vehicles, they're vehicles of political, they're apparatuses for politicians and political people to engage in politics. They're machine politics. It's not as bad as it once was in the late 1800s, but it still exists. So I just don't see the dichotomy, I guess, in the same way that you see it, but I'm happy to talk about it with you later on or at another session.
I just want to follow up, because I think I can illustrate this a little more cleanly. If I know something and I believe in it, I understand it, right? There's no amount of money that somebody can spend on messaging to me to change my mind. So, in a sense, once I've been made aware of what a policy that a candidate is advocating for, that they espouse, they will go and they will, pursue, my vote is for them regardless of how much somebody spends for or against me supporting them.
But you may be unique.
I was gonna say, I think that the majority of people out there who vote are, and I don't like this term, but low information voters. They're voting with very little information, and they are swayed by political commercials and the rest, the money that is spent in these elections. And money does run elections, and I believe both of those things are true. I don't believe in the choice between the two of them. I don't believe they're mutually exclusive. That being people having power in politics and money controlling politics, because money does have a significant amount of influence in this world.
It gets the message.
It gets the message across, but there are plenty of examples where you can organize a movement of people to have the same level of power as somebody who's got $1 billion. If you have $1 billion, you've got a lot of power. But if you have 1 billion people, you've got a lot of power too. Both of those things are true. So money does have power in this world. Money controls politics in a lot of ways because we've allowed the system to be set up such that it does. Citizens United has said that corporations are people and they can spend an unlimited amount of money in the elections. And there are ways, like in Montana, state legislators are trying their best to make it clear that this is not true, and doing things that, hopefully we'll talk about later on in the filing period that a place like New Hampshire could potentially do to take on money in politics. But I just don't see I don't see the choice in the same way that you do.
But you just said it. You said it very directly. You said low information voter, right? And that's the whole point of these meetings right here, is to increase the amount of information that voters have. And I actually trust every member of this room that's been here or has already left, that they're perfectly capable of understanding information and consuming it in a way that forms a cohesive ideological position that also inoculates them from the counter spending of a candidate that would wish to manipulate their vote into being cast for a candidate that may ultimately advocate for policy against their interests. So my question is really like, if this is the true forum, then why is the information provided still contained within the paint lines of the road, as opposed to acknowledging that there have been multiple opportunities to turn away from it along the journey?
I think that I hear what you're saying in the sense that we want low information voters to be brought to the place where they have enough civic education to where they have principles, and those principles won't be waived by the low information blast that occurs from the corporate state that advertises for their corporate politicians. The second part of that, I think these forums are the place where, the second part of the question, the answer to that question is the road is where you drive. You don't drive on the shoulder, you don't drive in the forest. There is a road, you drive on it. And so you do kind of have to operate in, especially for us, as, I hate this term too, but it is somewhat true. Peter came from the railroad. I was out driving today for somebody. We're regular people. We're still on the legislature. I again don't like that term. I think that they should pay us. And I don't think a citizen legislature means that you shouldn't be compensated for the time you spend up in the legislature, which is what people, I think, believe. But we have a road that's there with a structure of terms and different ways to speak about politics that you operate in. And so, I agree that ideally we'd be able to operate outside of those structures, terms, how you talk about those things, but I think that that's just how you connect to people.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this. I guess my real curiosity is like, I think for a lot of people, they feel like politics is sort of on autopilot. And, it's like, to your point, it's like, well, we stay on the road that we have, but that makes me wonder if we don't have blinders on and we're driving at night and we how many people have passed a road that they were supposed to turn on because they didn't see it, or it came up too soon or something. And that's really just I just wonder about it.
I agree with that 100%. but I will push back, and I know you might not agree, but I believe Peter and I to be, at least Peter, fantastic examples of what a legislator should be, somebody who approaches every issue based on what the merit of that issue is, reads the text of the bill, listens to people while they're on the House floor. He's not an ideologue. He's not operating in those same kind of blinders that keep people from, in those silos that keep people from understanding that this isn't, it's an ideological fight. This is something that...
And I agree. Peter's, former conservative who left the party, if I'm not mistaken.
Conservative,
Yeah,
conservative.
Republican, sorry.
The only Democrat elected down in the Milford Amherst district for a while.
Sure.
Out of 8 reps.
Yeah.
But it's amazing going back to the fact what people know and the uninformed voter. Jonah and I get numerous emails and letters and phone calls from people thinking that we're in Congress. And it's just...
Release the Epstein files, please, release the Epstein files.
You've got to do something. Why are you in Washington? And that goes to show you how informed people are or are not.